one look at this beach, I appreciated its potential. Although I didn't know all the significance of everything that I was going to be dealing with. I didn't really understand that it was the oldest of the amphibia.
How did you recognize the potential of the beach?
There's a real two-part story to that. One is there's bones, and bones are seldom found at many sites, and they're usually more important. So there's a significant work likely to be done if you can find that. Many rocks here with footprints. This could easily be your heel with claws.
It's a wet mud.
This is fairly distorted and not 100% certain. But Blue Beach is astounding. No. What we want is actually, I want a Rosetta Stone. I want a decoder ring. In other words, I want to be able to collect good, bad, dismal, and almost invisible tracks, and then one day create a sliding scale to show how this species looks as it changes preservation states.
Right.
And that can be done because we have so many. Here's how footprints preserve in sediment. This is real important to understanding what you're looking at. You have layers of silt, and the animal walks, and he crushes down layers underfoot.
Okay.
What happens is, when we get a layer of sediment and another thin layer of sediment, and they accumulate to make these layer cakes, layer 1 likes to stick to layer 2, likes to stick to layer 3, and if there's just mineral on mineral, it tends to cement together.
Okay.
And I can't open this rock and tap it and see that paleosurface.
Some of the tracks.
Yes. Now I got a trick, and this is a thing in paleontology. Fossils are found because the environment is right for them to be preserved in that rock, and that is actually echoed by the rock itself. So I can look at a rock and tell you the nature of its deposition and its likelihood of tracks. So when I come out here to look for footprints, I do not look at every rock on the beach. I stand here and I go, maybe you, maybe you, and definitely this.
You've refined your search image over time.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Well, and you have to learn to ignore the ones that are going to just take up all day and not have anything for you. So there's 2 faint prints. And 2 more very, very faint impressions. And this is a typical walking pattern for an aquatic tetrapod who's wriggling. A para on the left, a para on the right, usually hind foot, front foot.
So this would have been from tracks from the same individual?
Yes, this is a pretty faint trackway. Maybe about 3 feet. This piece of what we call first reef. And these are all partings. Now look, there's other partings. Now I can't put my hammer just anywhere on a rock, but certain layers are ready to do this. There's a parting. You can even see the wetness that's still hanging on in it.
So that's where the algae layer would have been that you were talking about? Yeah,
and maybe others. There's partings, and then there could be things that are more like stubborn partings. Some jump apart without being spoken to, and others need a little coaxing. So not all partings are the same, but I get a general blow, and it's not hard. So this could have been another paleo surface. It is. This could have been another track-bearing layer, because in this particular complex of rock, which is right over here, we've got 16 layers of tracks within that much thickness of the layer.
You don't know what you're going to find until you open it up.
So here's a story. I knew about tracks all along. I like shadow too. I play the shadow.
Yeah, it helps you see them.
Yeah. If you can pick up your tracks, you can't do that as a tracker too easy. You can't pick them up and inspect, but that's more here. Same layer, really. You got toe, toe, toe. You can see the ends.
Yeah.
Faint. But when I came here, I knew these were here. This place was famous for tracks. So one of my first missions was, I want to find me some. because that's really special. It took me 3 years to know I had some.
Right.
3 seasons, and now I can hit one a minute.
Yes. Now you
And
see them everywhere. You're developing
as I
a
developed,
fossil
yeah,
tracker,
suddenly I saw them everywhere. And we went from, nobody knew about the tracks of Blue Beach in detail yet. There was only 3 layers reported to contain them. We now have over 100 layers identified and located. Then, having learned something about footprints and footprint preservation and fossils, we were invited to a congress in New Mexico. And I went on the field trip. I couldn't catch on to finding bones, but I sure could find the tracks. They were just like Blue Beach. The rules were the same, the rock types were the same, and everything had the same look. This is mud crack in negative, with footprints usually that are often by the mud crack. Another thing that happens, an animal walks on mud that's still wet, he leaves a trail, the mud dries and goes to shrink. The mud crack doesn't form and miss the track, the mud crack follows the tracks.
Okay.
Because it's like I have poked holes in a book of stamps,
Yeah.
and now I'm going to pull them apart with tension, and the rip is going to go from hole to hole.
So this might follow some sort of trail that was...
Yeah, to find my footprints around mud cracks, my first place I look is at the juncture of mud cracks, or on the mud crack somewhere, not in here, because seldom there's one that didn't get involved too much. So here's another one with a parting. We know that there's a wave ripple level under there too. So I did this the other day for Canadian Press. We got the money shot. We opened one up and found a track that was decent.
That looks like mud ripples
It
on
is.
a mud flat.
Yes, Blue Beach was an ancient beach. So these are wave ripples, counterpart. They come apart because there's a stubborn parting there. It's stubborn, I had to tap it. So there's an indentation here. These are underprints. The actual track maker probably walked in here. There's also some level of erosion can happen. They don't always get protected in time by algae from erosion. So tracks should wash away and often do. Footprint fossils are difficult to make. All I have to do to prove my case on how difficult is it to make a footprint fossil is to tell you that the next footprints are 20 million years up the road from here in geologic time, and they're in Pennsylvania, and nobody has found tracks between 350 and 330 yet. There's 20 million years of geologic time where no one has found a footprint yet. So we know the animals were around. A lot of footprints wash away. No, they're not even fragmented. They're actually just disassembled animals. So our idea of the skeleton is fragmentary, but many of these are well preserved, complete bones.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just individual bones.
Generally, yeah, large quantities of individual.
Even these little ones, these are just from very small.
They're mostly the body scales, and the larger pieces are cranial jigsaw puzzle of cranial parts.
So these be like fish scales?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This single block probably contains a couple of species at least. And then there's longer elements that are probably part of the gill apparatus or jaw bones, and they may belong to other groups. Several.
Could someone who knew a lot more about fossils than I do identify species?
Many times.
From this? Yeah?
Yes. Many of the individual bones are one of a kind in design. Even the fish scales have unique patterns, and in the past scientists classified things just by the scales.
You work with what you got.
Yeah. Once a week, we walk here, we might find a tetrapod bowl. Once a week, maybe. And thousands of fossils get eaten up by the tide.
So, the fossil collecting situation is somewhat different here than in Alberta.
Yeah. Even the Badlands, though, same thing. And the United States Western United States have a vast region, the same. If we look at the natural erosion in the Badlands and the number of dinosaur fossils that crop up in Alberta every rainy season, how many of them just crumble to dust?
Because nobody's there.
Yeah, because nobody can collect them. In fact, it's a known fact that if we took every single professional paleontologist in the world and sent them to Utah just to try to control Utah's erosion, and every pro collected every bone they could from the Utah dinosaurs, there wouldn't be enough of them. The whole world of paleontologists isn't enough hands.
So the world needs more paleontologists?
Everyday people make important discoveries because they have the time. And it doesn't even take a lot of recognition. You can find things without knowing a darn thing. The good fossils sometimes are obvious.
I'm going to take that.
Yeah. At first, you could say, this looks like something, I'm going to take it, and that's how I operated. I collected thousands of bones without knowing what they were. But I can now look at this one and get quite happy because we just found a reasonably complete rhizodont pelvis.
Oh, neat.
And it's a very bizarre bone with a big flange and a small prong, and it's very elongate and slender. But this is the
important part of their
inadequate
anatomy
pelvis.
Because it shows that they're moving towards being able to walk.
Yes.
Yeah.
He drags his hind end, but his cousins will perfect this, and the tetrapods will actually put it to use. The fish don't really put it to use, but they're already developing it. We only have a handful of these, and that's a pretty good find, because it's laid out here, instantly recognizable.
Are you going to keep it?
Yeah, that's going to go down and record as today.
Is that what your bag's for? Finds?
Yeah. This goes in today, dated today. I would class it as zone D. I generally give the area of the beach a kind of a notation of what zone I was standing in. I do believe this is probably raindrop based on the look at the back, which is invertebrate trails and burrows. Many parallel over trails. Got the material roads. The travel and this side. On top of the system. An elegant non-fossil, but it really is a nifty idea about preservation. If you can get that preserved like that with the little crater rims, then you can almost expect anything to be well preserved. It's actually quite rare. Rain is not a rare event, but preserved raindrop impressions are rare.
Just not here.
No, that's only one layer I know of. It's rare here, absolutely. In this million years of rock, I only seen the one layer that I can really...
So that's a trail.
Yeah, and now I've got a problem. I thought I was going to carry that. I was going to carry another one home.
Well, you have me,
Right
I
here.
can carry something.
I got more than one. So here is some beautiful examples of distorted tracks and trails where you get the full form of the foot.
So are these toes?
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5.
Probably 5 in most cases, and some of the amphibians go into 4 in the front.
Yeah, like modern amphibians.
Yes. Yeah, we could reduce toes, but this is an interesting subject. You know that the tetrapods before the gap, we only know 3 of them by their hands and feet. And one had 6 toes, one had 7 toes, and one had 8.
So that's very different.
We came from fishes, and they had more than 5 bones.
Yeah.
And the origin of the land animals must have, theory says, must have been a 5-toed animal that became our ancestors.
There's some sort of bottleneck, because now all animals seem to be a variant on 5.
Yeah, 5 is the natural max.
Yeah.
We can see humans and cats and many species who have a 6th toe. That's a mutation. We would never classify the group as a 6-toe species. That's character. So everything after the gap is 5-toed. That's why we count by 10. So this is
just through some sort of accident of evolution, we could be counting by 12s if it had been a 6-toed ancestor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So a very interesting question for us early on would be, are we going to find 6-toe footprints at Blue Beach? and we're going to find enough to be able to say they're not a mutation. The answer is we have not found them. And the answer may be not that there isn't a six-toe animal here. The answer just may be, what I think, is that the old guard didn't walk. And so they don't leave a track record. They're still not walking. They're becoming more aquatic than ever by signs of our bones. Our bones say that they're becoming more fish-like over time, not trying still to get on land. So we don't think that the first land animals walked, or the first tetrapods walked, and we're not going to see a six-toe foot.
Yeah, that's impressive that you're kind of a self-taught fossil tracker, because these things are very slow to learn on your own.
This is a great place to teach you what you want, though.
Yeah.
I had 100 layers. Another advantage of 100 layers is that I'm sampling different qualities of mud now, different substrates, and I get to see the role that the substrate difference plays in the preservation of the track, as well as other factors.
How well they're preserved.
Yeah. You have several factors that all have their own separate influences on tracking, which is why it's not out of line for me to collect this distorted junk and say these are important to my sample. These are the interesting, important kind. Anytime I can get some morphometrics, that's important too. The distance of the escapement gate and the angle and the pace of angulation. Those are important. No matter how bad the footprint itself is, if I can get a gate pattern, that's important.
That provides information you can't get from fossil bones.
Not individual bones, only from skeletons. You can get the relationship from this bone to this point, and then how far from the hip to the shoulder, and then how far from this bone to this bone. You start to do some meaningful discussion about how fast he's walking, stuff like that.
Yeah,
over here is the second ridge. This comes off of one of these ledges, but here are many more tracks in situ. Here I was cracking open the mud crack on one side and the toad and the wave ripples on the other. Here it is, the wave ripple level. That's a nice marsh plant. That's a wetlands plant. It's growing here. There are others that are like this that are difficult to see. You see them in there on all the slabs, really, and you could lift that off and see more. I like to let nature lift this stuff. It's better if it's naturally exposed. And right up here, we get a continuation of some of those same layers, and we can see the effects of belly dragging. I call this the sloppy layer, and I feel it's dragging its belly. You see the trough in this area.
Could it be a tail?
It's his whole, probably chest.
Okay.
But the myth of belly dragging is that early amphibians had to drag their belly because the locomotion was slowly achieved. Getting up in challenging gravity at first was difficult. So for many hundreds of years, paleontologists believed tetrapods dragged their bellies.
Yeah, they slid across the surface.
Yeah, until their legs got strong enough. That's the idea. Drug themselves like lazy amphibians. Well, that's a myth. We have the oldest tracks, and we have very rare evidence of this. Almost never do they drag. And I call this the sloppy layer because I blame the dragging on the fact that they're sinking into the mud.
Okay.
It's too sloppy, and you and I would drag ourselves through it too. That's the only reason.
And it was lucky enough that their hug marks filled in and just left that depression where their belly went.
Yeah, it's underprinting too. So I mean, he was above this, but he was definitely deforming a lot of stuff as he drug himself through it. These are not clear prints either because they're underprints and overprints. Only a few times would you get a clear print, and some layers are not really good at clear printing. They're almost all, some layers are strictly underprint. But yeah, I blame it on the dragging. The only thing designed to touch the ground is your hands and your feet. The tetrapod, nature made one part of you that was really going to handle interacting with that hostile surface. That's your pins. Well, if you drag your belly and you snag one scale and you get a little cut, you could be infected. And that could mean you die and you don't reproduce, and that means evolution doesn't favor you for your belly dragging. The guy who doesn't drag his belly lives longer, has more babies, and therefore evolution starts to grow that population. So belly dragging, we see the same species of footprint. When I see this footprint clearly in this layer, we have some. When we get a good look at him, he's just our most common species, and we know him well, and he doesn't drag his belly in any of the other layers. That's another thing that we can show, that he only drags occasionally. In the lower level with some dismal underprinting too. Once you get into a zone, there's usually several associated layers close together where conditions were normal enough to get some repeat preservation of footprints. The tetrapods probably walked on every other mud layer going too, but they're not preserved. In fact, the terrestrial walkers that leave all the tracks already are standing up with narrow gaits. They're really not sprawling like alligators. They're already up really very, very quickly up. And no, I don't think that they dragged their bellies for any length of time. The fish did. The fish did some dragging, but by the time they turned into tetrapods and started becoming more terrestrial, I think that sorted out right away. So this is our museum, and it basically houses the collection of things that we've found here over the last 40 years, the combined efforts of many collectors to build a collection that is probably 100,000 pounds of fossils. So what we have here is this representation of some of the best of it for comparative sake. We go through various topics around the room, and upstairs is strictly for storage. We have many bones up there. This is fossil bones down here of several of our most important groups. This cabinet deals with a giant fish that we had, and this giant fish has turned out to produce probably about 60% of the big bones that we've been finding.